Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks everyone for being here. It's 5:30 exactly, and let's get started. Maybe we can finish early a little bit like last month. Well, be crazy. Starting us off, let's get to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also, can you do a roll call vote, please? Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Present.
Commissioner Federer,
Present.
Commissioner Marshall,
Here.
Commissioner Sipkins,
Present.
Commissioner Wolfer,
Present.
Vice Chair Robin,
Yes, present.
Chair Soto.
Present.
We have Commissioner Gabarderos, Commissioner Thigpen, and Commissioner Hopkins. Not at today's meeting.
We have one. Right.
We do.
Great, so thank you, Melissa. Moving on to the acceptance of the agenda, the Measure J Commission will discuss the order of the agenda and may amend the order, add items or remove items from the agenda for discussion. Any comments or questions or anything to remove from the agenda that Melissa sent out on Monday?
I move to accept.
Great, thank you.
Second.
Great, love the enthusiasm. All in favor? Yes? Aye.
Motion has.
Perfect, okay. Next we have approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from January 18th, 2024. Last month's minutes are regular meeting minutes. They were also in our agenda. Looking for a motion if no one has any edits or notes.
Move to accept.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of the minutes from January 18th as presented, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Great, thank you. Although for clarity, Melissa, I think if you miss a meeting, you can still vote for it, right? You can abstain, but I'm just saying. Melissa?
You could.
Yes, yeah.
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay, great. Next, we have public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Measure J Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. And although the commission values everyone's comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda, which we just approved. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. I know we have a viewer, but do we have any speakers?
We
Either-
do not have any public comment.
Okay, great. Let's move us, I mean, we're like 4 minutes in, we're doing great progress. So I don't really have much for the welcome, just really appreciate everyone being here. I know there was, I'm just looking forward to kind of looking at where we are revenue wise and also some just general process questions for the future. So that takes us to new business. And I'm gonna pass it over to Chris for our budget update for February.
Thank you, Chair Soto, appreciate it.
Mhm.
Not a lot of movement, this meeting came up on us pretty quickly, so not a whole lot of movement in the numbers. The same projects are being worked and money being spent on them. But I'll just quickly kind of run through some of the numbers. So I'm gonna go over to the third column, year-to-date fiscal year 2023-24 in your budget update packet. We'll start with the sales tax revenue is about 7.6 million. We'll have a little bit of a sales tax discussion on the next agenda item. Income is really strong. The city's portfolio is doing really well. And so all of our funds that earn interest on their cash balances are doing very well. You can see Measure J is doing really well with their income. For a total revenue of just over $8 million. Street repairs, we're getting closer and closer to spending that $9 million. We just spent a little bit to date, so, but I understand that contract's getting awarded on the 29th. And, so we should be able to start working that 9 million pretty quickly. Community initiative projects, $336,000, and the airport reserve is 200,000. Skipping down to the debt service, again, just as a reminder, this is the downtown revitalization project that we, that the Measure J service funded, and they fund a total of 3 million, a little over 3 million per year on debt service. Downtown maintenance, landscaping and security, we're at 362,000 for year to date. And then total capital project spend is 5.1 million. Total expenses, as you see at the bottom, 7.6. We're showing a surplus right now of about $326,000. So I'm gonna flip over to the detail unless anybody has any general questions about the finances. So if we flip over to the detail, the second to the last column, if you go down to the total, you can see that $7.6 million equals our total expenditures on the front page. And you can see where we're spending our money. So again, the big dollars are with the recreational LED lighting. To date, about 3.4 million. I think that project's almost wrapped up. The Arnica Track Sewer Phase 4 at 575,000. And so those are really the two biggest projects that are in play right now. We'll flip over to the community initiated projects. And again, it's the same kind of projects as we talked about last month. Boys and Girls Club drainage. I think that project is complete and we've got the final expenses in. And that's at 196, so just under $200,000. And the Demuth Dog Park upgrades at 110,000. And then the swim center locker rooms are getting started at 24,000. So a total of 336,000 for this year's fiscal year 23-24 community initiated projects. There's a lot of these projects that are getting ready to start or they're in process. So we feel like this number is going to jump up over the next few months and be significant. So we're about ready to dip into a lot of these dollars. With that, that concludes the presentation for finance. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer.
Chris, here's here. I have a question about when a project is completed or appears that we're not going to be spending all the money that was allocated in the budget for a project. When do you transfer that money back as available funds?
Yeah, we usually give it a little bit because we want to wait to be sure that we have the final expenses come through, but we should be able to close that project out within a few months. If there's any remaining balance for a project, it just falls back into our ending fund balance.
Yeah, for example, the Demuth Park is one that looks like it's gonna have considerable funds left over because the shade was not did not cost as much as it was budgeted.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody's here that can talk about if that amount can be, is on target or not, but if there is money left over, we'll certainly close it out and anything left to go down to fund balance.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So when the final invoice comes in, when we release retention, a invoice gets circulated or a form gets circulated where I end up signing off and closing the project down, and that's when he's triggered to actually put the money back in reserve or back into the pay. So it takes a while. After we award, we accept the project, it goes to council accepts it, and we have about 30 days before we get, we're able to release the retention and get an invoice. So these projects take a while to close out.
Thank you.
I think it really is great. So many things are in process and done because we used to just look at them dead in the water. So thank you for all your hard work on these.
Any other questions?
I do,
Mhm.
and it's probably because I didn't see it in the minutes. What happened to the fencing between the pool and the pavilion?
That fencing is part of the bigger aquatic center project, so it is part of the project. We're moving forward with that design.
Okay,
Yeah, if you,
thanks.
number 10 on that list on the community state projects, you can see I've added the fencing between the pool and pavilion to the description of that project, so those are combined.
I have another quick question around, this other project, so recognize that the lighting is expected to complete, this spring. There was one more, but are there any other ones that we're expecting to be, close to finish? In any of these other ones that are in process or under construction? Like, are any other projects expected to change status by June? Either design moving on to, next phase, or if it's a construction expected to finish, like, by July. Do we anticipate
So
some major?
the answer is yes, but it depends on many, variables and which project we're talking about. For example, the library renovations, we're about to award on the 29th, an additional 1.3 million to the architect. So that, just right there, it changes status. We start working on the new design for the entire renovation. If you keep on going down, the fire training facility, that one, I mean, if you'd like, I can go down and try to give you.
Well,
sort of.
maybe in particular, the ones that are like in process, like I'm curious if any of them are going to be completed. So I was thinking, also just focus. There's the LED lighting, the park benches says in process. The other one I was looking at was the Indian Canyon Roundabout, says 75% complete, working on, right, like, it might be any, like, we don't have to go through the whole thing, but if there's any that stand out that should have significant, like, status updates. You think in the next, like, 3 to 6 months?
So again, so on the bench, I won't be able to speak to, but like the roundabout project, we're going to council on the 29th to purchase property. It's not part of the Measure J fund, but it is part of the project. So we are working on essentially the right-of-way phase of that project. So that is, so I can elaborate, and I think it'd probably be best if during the course of review or during the course before we start the agenda, writing up our memos to the commission, if you guys ask questions, then I can thoroughly respond to those questions on any given project. Because I know I mentioned it before, they're all in different phases and they take, they're slow moving, but they are being worked on. And I can touch a little bit more upon that when I start going over the projects. Well, I'll try to show the rest of the commission how I come up with projects, how they're scoped and how, the different phases. So I can probably, that might help.
Yeah,
But it's kind of, it goes to the same process that I've always talked about. It's, we go to design sometimes takes a very long time. And there's like the roundabout, there's right-of-way acquisition. So there's 4 or 5 properties that we have to work with to acquire. Those take a while. So it's a slow turtle that's moving, but it never stops. It keeps on going.
Yeah, no, and I fully respect that and I appreciate that. Yeah, I think for me, it's, sometimes we each might have like 2 or 3 or 4 projects that kind of stand out, or we have the deadline in our mind of, oh, it should be roughly done around this time. So I was just kind of curious if there was other ones that would be helpful to be on our radar. And then also, we can help promote or kind of celebrate that work. When not just when it's done, but also when milestones happen, right? Kind of recognizing that work too.
I'm gonna go ahead and give a couple updates since you had asked that question on some non-engineering, non-public works projects.
Sure.
So if we look at the project list and we go down to project 1916, that's the 911 CAD RMS that the police department's working right now. So they are at the close of the RFP process. And then once the RFP process closes and they select a consultant, they go through about a 3 to 6 month discovery process. They find the product that they like, and then they have to do another RFP for the vendor that sells that product. That's about a 6 month process. And then it takes about 12 months to implement. So that project there, which is a big project, it's about $2.75 million. It's about 18 to 24 months from being completed. The next one, 1923, this is the keyless entry for the fire stations project that IT is running. They are working through their quotes right now. They feel like they can have this project completed by the end of the year. And then lastly, I'll go all the way down to the 22-37-1, which is about 5 up from the bottom. That's the airport projects. If you remember, they brought those projects to us, and one of the bigger ones was $1 million shade structure that they want to put over the rideshare area. There's a few other smaller ones in that list. They're taking those projects to the council on the 29th. So, that should be in front of council. So once, if council does approve those, then we should be able to get started on those projects. That's all the updates that I have.
That's great. Any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
Joel. Joel, on the road work, the visit, it appears that could be comments, you're about to sign contracts up at the end of the month. Do you have any visibility for us on whether pricing has changed? Has anything changed in that regard, which has always been the topic of, it's always more than we want, pricing, any difference from that narrative that you've experienced?
So no, I think we are the beneficiaries of competition. There are two major contractors that go after our work, Granite Construction and Manage Corporation. Last year I think Manage had won the contract 3 years in a row, and then Granite won it last year. So we spent the money, and this year Manage went again, and they came in slightly under the 9 million projected. So competition in this particular project is good for us, and it came in well within the budget that we set for it. So that's good. Pricing still the same, so we used higher values to determine the extent of the streets we were actually gonna pave. So we're doing less work for more money, but the contractors are competing properly, which gives us good, good bang for our buck.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question for Chris, and I don't want you to think I'm a curmudgeon or the Matt Gates of this commission, but I have a question about the Plaza Theater. I noticed that the museum has now been added to the project. Did that increase the estimated construction costs at all?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think it has, at least it hasn't come across my desk that it's gonna be increased.
And it's still set for construction to begin sometime in the next 30 or 40 days?
Yes.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Great questions. Moving forward, to some discussion items that we have for tonight. The sales tax analysis, Chris, do you want us?
Yes, thank you. Just want to talk a little bit about sales tax, how it works, so that whenever we talk about, if we're down or if we're up, then you guys kind of are aware of the time period that's associated with that. So the city collects their sales tax on a cash basis. And then at the end of the year, we convert to a modified accrual. I don't know their accounting terms. What that means is when sales tax gets issued to us by the CDTFA, it's the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. They oversee all the taxes that gets distributed to the municipalities. That we receive our check in December or January, whatever it is. That's 2 months after the sales month. So if we receive a check for sales tax in December, that's for October sales. So it's very important to remember that when I talked about the sales tax last month, I talked to us about it being down. We have to remember when that time period was, and we were mainly talking about July through September. And when looking at the analysis that I prepared, you can see that we are down, still strong, and I'll get to that in just a minute. One of the reasons why we're down is the month of September, and some speculation is, I'm sure everybody remembers, Tropical Storm Hillary came through in late August. And so we feel that was an impact in, TOT was down September, sales tax was down in September. So though, if you can see the history here, we are pretty down. It's interesting that we are up in September from 22, but we are down considerably from last year. And that's what really was driving us to be down for that particular time period. So important to know that this time period, when I've said we have $7.5 million in sales tax, that's through January, which is July through November sales. So we're still behind. We have a lot of time to go. Our busy season is now, between now and June, and when we collect sales tax in June, that means we're collecting for April. That's a huge month. We have a lot of time to make up if we're in a deficiency right now. So looking at where we are, today, at $7.5 million versus 8 million last year. 8 million last year was a strong year. A strong year in the general fund. As a matter of fact, the general fund had its record sales tax year last year at 33 million. So that's a consideration why we're down twos. We have a very strong fiscal year 23. Flipping over the page and looking at our last 5 years of the sales tax collections. Last year, we collected 21.9 million. In fiscal year 22, 22.2 million. And then fiscal year 21, 17, 20 was the COVID year, 14, pre-COVID, and 19, 16 million. So we are in some very good times and we're having very strong sales tax years. 22 coming out of COVID, and 22 coming out in 23 were some of the best years the city has ever had, the best years Measure J has ever had. Even if we predict sales tax to come in, 21.5 million this year, historically, it's a strong year. So I want to give it the impression that, we're, even though we might be slightly down from budget, we're still on a strong path historically for Measure J. So just want to make sure we get that out. If anybody has any questions about sales tax, we weren't happy to take them.
I have a quick question. So this is really helpful to see the fiscal year 23, or the last 5 years sales tax. Do you even happen to know roughly the Measure J revenue of the last 5 years, or is that?
That's the Measure J
This is all
revenue.
Measure J.
That's particular Measure J, yeah.
Okay.
It's the general fund is actually pretty similar. In fact, that 33 million in 23, 31 million in 22, and after that, historically it drops off considerably to 25 million. So we've had experienced sales tax as a city, general fund, Measure J, very strong years in the last couple of years.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was just Measure J. Thank you. Any other questions on the sales tax?
Quick question. Chris, I think it was last month that you said that you might be getting some qualitative information from the business community.
So that's, I believe I said, that's what our tax consultants do. So that's not our job to go do that. We do have a chief economic development officer that's very close to the business community, and he gets some of that information. But that's not finance's job. That's our tax consultants will sometimes get to some of the business community and try to figure out, how we're looking forward, because they do forecasts for us. So that's really some things that they do.
And do you know, or you recall from this, the run rate for the last half year, have you been able to isolate where some soft spots might be in the revenue sources?
For sales tax?
Yes.
You mean by industry?
Right. So by sector, does that come through?
It does. I'll have to analyze that. We do have that information. I do know that our two strongest sectors are restaurants, the food business area, and auto sales. And they make up, almost half of what our sales tax is. So those are the strongest areas. If they're down, like they were in September, then probably more likely our sales tax in total will be down.
Yeah, so maybe the next time to that issue, as you digest more of a complete year.
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
help with that story for us, that the qualitative is more related to the
Yeah,
quantitative.
it's very good information. We get all that detail. It's very fun to go through. So. Yeah, very fun for me. And you, Brian.
I'm sure other people will get a small kick out of it too.
No.
City engineer.
Negative for Joel. I think that takes us to the capital projects. And again, as a reminder for the commissioner, anybody watching, we thought it might be helpful to kind of slowly work our way as a kind of a refresher on some of our capital projects. Some of these have been on here for a while. Some of them are, reoccurring investments that we're doing, kind of like street paving. So thank you, Joel, for kind of starting this process again with us, especially for our new commissioners.
Sure, and that's sort of what the memos are really intended to do, is to kind of guide the new commissioners through what the process is that we go through to develop new project, right? A new project comes from many different sources. It can be council driven, resident driven, different commission driven, right? They put in requests. We analyze and we start looking whether a project is going to be, become a capital project. So one of the things that one of the first links I put here, or the only link I put here, is to the actual capital, 5-year capital program that we have, because the capital program is not just composed of Measure J funds, it's composed of six or 7 different funding sources. So when you do click on that, it's essentially is what the council approved. It's our 5-year budget for each one of the projects that we have going on, and all the funding sources and the years projected for those funds to be spent, right? So it's quite a big list, right? And we're working through all these projects, and all these projects are in different phases. I'd like to say, right? They're in design. So the very first couple of projects that are here are bridge projects in our 5-year CIP, right? Currently, we have 6 active federally funded bridges. The oldest, if you will, started in 2001, and I am constructing it just in 2024. That's how long it takes to get through the process, right? So every time I get asked, where are you at? What phase are you at? What's going on with the project? The bridge projects are really the extreme. They take so long to get through all the federal environmental reviews, right-of-way purchases. So that project took essentially 22 years from conception to actually starting construction. The other highlight is Vistachino Bridge, down the wash, going towards Cathedral City. That is almost a $100 million bridge project. That one was started in 2010. You can say, so I probably won't be building it till, 20 years to that. But actually it's that was sort of kidding. We are working to try to build it by 2026, 2027, if everything goes well. But when you're dealing with the states, it's actually, those timelines are very unpredictable. Council members ask me all the time, I have a prepared statement. Here's where I think these projects are. But the caveat is, I don't know any of the real timelines because Caltrans always, is difficult to get through. So, that's kind of why I put that link there, if anyone is curious. And if I did my job right and Chris did his job right, the numbers that are in the 5-year CIP are also reflected in our planning sheets that are right behind here. So each one should be matching up. What we do is we try to figure out what our current available balance is before we're doing our budgeting. We figure out, so for example, let's take, let me stop a little bit. The number 1608 is essentially that first digit, those 2 digits is when the project was started or envisioned or became a capital project. So the main library, the conversation started around, before 2016, but it became an official capital project in 2016. Plaza Theater was in 2018. So if you see all these projects that you have in front of you, the list of projects, the roundabout is in 2020. So we're in 2024 right now. We did pause. We didn't add any new projects in these 2 fiscal years. But we're trying to get through those old projects so that we can continue adding to the list of projects. And so pickleball was in 2022. It was discussed before, but that's when it became an official capital project. So if you want to turn the page,
So
yeah, go ahead. Stop me anytime if you want.
when you say it became a capital project, that means what in your department? Like, that means it's like something logged that requires maintenance and monitoring. Like, what does that mean when it says the conversation started and now it's a capital project?
When it became, well, officially it doesn't become a capital project until it gets budgeted. But for engineering, as we start tracking these projects, that's when we officially put it into our system to start tracking. And so I could essentially start a project in 2024, but if it's not funded, I can keep the same number 224, but it doesn't really become a capitally funded project until the council approves it. So that, for me, it's just a tracking system internal, but it gives you sort of an idea when these projects started.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? You can feel free to stop me at any time. I know I'm going to be sharing a lot of information, but really the goal here is to show you how I and my staff saw the project. So if you turn to the sheet 1608, one of the things we do, we started looking at, what department, what type of project is this, right? What department is it serving? Who's our internal client, if you will? So, when you're working in the private side, you have external clients. Internally here for the engineering department, we have multiple internal clients, right? Different departments are our clients. So that's who we have as our client, the library, the project. This is an old sheet. These are planning sheets, so they don't really mean anything. That what really is important is a 5-year CIP. So it's not on hold. It's now actually a project that's moving forward. You can see the location, a brief project description, a justification, and then we actually look to see how it conforms to the general plan. So we put a lot of information to try to get it to make sure that it's conforming with the general plan and what council wants and what the community wants, right? And then from there is when, the real magic starts, if you will. I know Chris, he says he likes numbers, and so I like numbers as well, but my numbers become, if I'm wrong with my numbers, I can't build anything. I'm sure if he's wrong, we don't have to lead it to the project. So numbers are important for sure. So here's how we break down our projects. We try to estimate how much a project costs, right? And again, going back to the number, right, in 2016, we could have estimated a certain amount, right? We could have said it's gonna cost this much. We estimate this is how much construction contingency is gonna be. But as time progresses and these projects keep on being planned and not really under design or construction, or even in design, the project costs can continue to go up until we actually put it out to bid. When we really put it out for the contractor to give us numbers, we don't know what this project is going to cost. We can do our best guess. We used to be very good at that until sort of the pandemic, inflation, supply chain issues. We were just really surprised in the last 4 years where we couldn't actually pin down the project costs. They were so variable, things were so variable. So it's I think it's starting to line again where we can sort of estimate what a project's gonna cost, but we're still very cautious when we put those numbers out there. So these numbers are used for budgeting purposes, and then what I do is I look at that total cost. I look at what my funds I have available to me, right? There's Measure J, there's the capital fund, there's grant money essentially coming from the state. There's Measure A, which is also gas tax dollars that I use. There's other forms of tax revenue that we get back that I use to build my projects. And then I take that amount and then I try to distribute it through several years when I think the last year is when I think the project's gonna be under construction. Again, it's just an estimate. If you see the CIP list, there's lots of projects there, so I'm estimating at all times when I think I'm gonna be under construction. So with that, you can turn to the pages, look at what the descriptions, take your time, and if you have questions, you can, ask them now, or, if something comes up, you can email me a question and I will definitely respond.
Joel, are you saying you estimate the library at 14 million?
So that particular library, estimate was when we were doing the grant funded portion of the project only. When we were only doing the retrofitting of the existing infrastructure,
Okay.
that now project has ballooned into a completely different animal. So that is old information that you have in your
And all
packet.
the grant money goes to infrastructure.
Correct. It's very limited, it's very specific that you can spend. So on February 29th, we're going to council because the council did decide on what scope they wanted for the library. So on the
Yep.
29th, we're gonna actually award a contract or an amendment to the architect's contract to start designing the bigger picture library, the additional scope. And then the plan is to use Chris and the prison services to bond for it and to get the money to it.
Well, I have a quick question. What's the difference between the administration cost estimate and the construction management? How
So
those,
administration is internal city staff. We still have to account for our work, right? We do bill to at least engineering bills to projects. We track our time. We're just estimating how much time we're gonna use. And those numbers are really, they're raw. We're never really exact. We can spend very little or a lot more. So the construction contingency, that's construction management, that's an actual outside firm that we use to do it. And those costs are generally, 50-25%, but again, they vary depending on the type of project.
thank you.
So with that,
I just have a question on the Plaza Theater, on the note that it was based on, cost is based on 2018 report. So these numbers we see here 6 years old,
They're generally old, yes.
so it's probably, and I'm not trying to be funny, but probably almost close to double that now.
So yeah, definitely the product leaders have a completely different life of what's in here, right? This was very preliminary, but the product leaders definitely has grown in scope and cost.
Thank you.
Sure. That pretty much concludes my.
I have a quick question. Just this is more, is this project still alive? The downtown, the Bollards, is that,
That one has not died, but there has been, a very long pause because the original intent of the bollards, the way they were designed and installed did not work. And since the contract was awarded, the bollards were installed, there hasn't been a real good solution to the problem that was encountered during construction of those bollards. So the project hasn't moved because I don't think that's been resolved. And I think it was David McAbee's predecessor that was dealing with that. But it is a situation that is still out there that hasn't been resolved. That's why the project hasn't moved on.
mhm. Yeah, and I guess it goes to a little bit of, recognizing that from, the full scope of some of these projects can take so long, and then it could just be unforeseen issues. But how we communicate those milestones and also these unforeseen changes. I'm thinking the bollards are one, and then the downtown water feature, that fountain, that the splash pad. And we're talking about new things now soon, I've heard new visions for and uses for the downtown park, and it's like, wait, we haven't finished that last thing, right? And so, I just wanna be mindful of not kind of chasing and funding every new shiny thing when there's some really, ongoing issues that we say that we're still committed to fixing or finding a solution for. So I don't know if you have kind of any thoughts on like,
So
how do we like hold on to like those like long tail?
So one of the things that we did do, and I think it hadn't been done for a little while since Measure J started, is we did not introduce new projects in this budget cycle for 2 years, right? That was sort of one of the things that I wanted to do is essentially what you're saying, is there's so many projects here that we're working on, let's get through them, let's finish them, and then let's slowly make sure that we're able to handle it and have the capacity, right? Because a lot of those projects that are here are not all engineering, there are other departments that are also working on them. We want to be able to have the capacity, have the staff to be able to do it. So by pausing and adding no new projects for a while, I think has allowed us to really start breathing and getting into and doing these projects, getting them done and moving on from them. So, Amy and her staff are working and have a website now that promotes our projects. They do talk about, I don't know if you've seen the new website that shows all the capital projects or the capital projects, the funding sources. It's actually a very well put together website. So that's a good source for promoting what we're doing. And projects that are sort of on like essentially, I'll talk to the park project, right, the splash pad. That one is being worked on actively. We have David's team trying to fix the issue that arose during the construction or the installation and the failure that's occurred at that splash pad. It's not a simple solution. It involves money, but we are still actively working, trying to resolve it. And it has been a while. I know, David, I don't know if you want to talk to it, but I know we're.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. That project definitely is still in the works, and we actually have a consultant we're working with right now.
Mr. Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good evening, council, commission members, sorry. Yes, that project is alive and we're trying to get that squared away. So we are working with a consultant currently to deal with the corrections that need to be made on that. So it has been a long time, but it certainly is on the top of our list to get dealt with.
That's great to hear. I know there's like the Parks Master Planning process, and there's a lot of people who care that Palm Springs is the only city in the desert that doesn't have water play for children. And so, you know, any progress, like we should be shouting any progress we have on that, and because it's, people are waiting for it, and so, I guess there are people who give up, right? Like, when it takes so long, they're like, oh, that's never gonna fix again, but if staff are still putting their time to it, like, we should really respect and honor that effort, so that people are looking forward to those updates.
Certainly. Thank you.
Hey, David, while you're up here, can
Absolutely.
you give an update on project, oops,
Oh, yes.
the 22-26, the San Rafael Drive turf conversion? We met on this, this past week, so.
Absolutely. This is one that's sort of been stalled for a while. I think there was some confusion on what could or couldn't be done, so we have just recently met and have determined that we can move forward with it, and that will start moving forward in a not too distant future. So that will happen. The issue, yeah, has been solved essentially. So you'll see that happening. And when that happens, it'll sort of match the rest of the city with what we're doing and changing over to drought tolerant landscaping. So that'll be a nice, nice for that area. So it'll look a lot much better. So I will have more information on that coming, but we are making progress. One more quick update if I can, just because you mentioned it and you reminded me, or someone mentioned it for the trail maintenance. That we've got a little bit of movement on that from the last time. And I probably have more information that I'll discuss with Chris and maybe give an update. Maybe next month if I can. So I have some folks I'm meeting with on that, so we may have a solution to get that moving. But I don't want to get ahead of the conversation yet, but I am meeting with those folks in the next couple of weeks. So there's that, the water feature we mentioned. Anything else that you have questions on, I'm happy to try to answer if you have anything for me.
I need clarification. When we talk about the downtown park maintenance, right? And we are locked into that until that, what do we call it, contract is over?
Yeah, I was gonna answer your question later because I forgot to earlier, but yes, so we are, that's what we're phasing out over the next 2 years. That downtown security contract, which I think you're referring to,
Right.
does come up in October of 24 this year.
Oh,
However, we are gonna, we plan to RFP those services and continue that service. And we will phase that out from Measure J, and when we phase it out in Measure J, we'll pick it up from the general fund.
okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I think when I was using like maintenance in another term, it was more of like the maintenance of the infrastructure itself. But yes, there is the maintenance budget line that we're phasing out. Any other questions? I mean, and this is, there's no dumb questions, all questions are welcome, in terms of the project creation process.
Right, so, Commissioner Wolfer, I think last time you asked me to look into the little sidewalk gap that was brought forward. I did look into it and, you know, just kind of, I knew this information, I had already researched it, and I just wanted to, you know, share here why it's very difficult to actually build that little strip of land, sidewalk. So we'll start with that, land where that sidewalk, is intended to go is allotted, it's a tribal member that owns that land, that's, you know, that's one item that I found. The second is the right of way there, that entire stretch is owned by Caltrans. We only have 40 feet of right of way, but the general plan circulation element calls for a 50-foot right of way. So the street section there would need to be at 38 feet and the sidewalk would be behind the 38 feet. So it wouldn't fit in the current right of way. So it doesn't fit in in the existing right of way. So you can't build that sidewalk unless you built it in the correct location. Adding to that, it's controlled by Caltrans, right? The city wouldn't be able to take on the project to try to get it moving forward, right? So even if we did start the project, we need to work with the allottees, we need to buy land, and the land probably would never be sold, so it'd be a very long process. What most cities do is they wait for developers to come, and they're the ones that build these areas, because they buy the land, they do everything, and we then require them to dedicate right away, or dedicate right away. Catty corner to this empty lot, it's also an empty area, That parcel is actually going through its development review, and they will be conditioned to dedicate extra right of way, to build a sidewalk, to do everything that is being asked on the south side, but they're doing it on the north side, so. That's sort of, and the other side is not owned, is not tribal. So there's just these things that prevent the city from really moving on that one particular location, but there's other areas that we've been asked to, and we start tracking them, and we start seeing if we have a budget for it, and we'll file it, I agree. And that those sidewalk gaps become a project and we build them in the future.
Thank you, Joel, I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Just make sure, in case there's anyone who's watching, who maybe is not familiar, this is the Vistachino Gap, right?
Correct, that's the Chino Gap, it's just adjacent to the airport property.
Mhm.
Right, so there's sidewalk on one side in front of the airport property, sidewalk on the developed side, but there's a missing piece in the middle. The city can't just go and build a little asphalt sidewalk, because if somebody gets hurt guys there, then we've created a hazard that makes it, a city problem, which we get sued all the time on things that really aren't related to us, but that one, we would start owning that situation if we did actually try to go build something just really quickly haphazardly within a right of way that's not adequate for it, so it has a lot of issues, it's not for lack of trying, we're just, our hands are really tied.
I just want to answer one question from last meeting as well, while we're doing it before we go on this topic. If you had a question about the $1 million transfer over to the capital fund for the PD radios, and you wanted to know if they were purchased. They were purchased. The total cost of the PD radios was almost a couple $1 million, so all the Measure J funds were used and well used.
Another project done.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. Okay, that brings us to our third discussion item on the future of Measure J reporting. Just a little context, and this is truly just like a discussion point, not any clear expectations at this point, but we have about what, 10, 12 years worth of Measure J revenue, right? So we have over a decade's worth of revenue. The revenue per year has increased significantly from the first few years of Measure J. And there's been public comment, but also, just kind of sometimes there's like a little questions about Measure J, what does it fund, where has it gone? And so wanted to have just kind of a general conversation around how we want to think about communicating what Measure J has been able to accomplish in a digestible way. Like, I'm very proud of the transparency of this commission, and I really appreciate everyone's kind of seriousness, both staff and commissioners. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's like easily digestible for the public and for the community. And given that the future of Measure J, and whether or not it's permanent or whatever, I think there could be some benefit as to how we, repackage. I share always has really helpful language. How do we repackage the data and numbers that we see in a way that then could be meaningfully understood by community members? So that's kind of just like the discussion prompt. Chris, I don't know if you had kind of any general thoughts or reactions, and then maybe we can have stuff.
Sure, thanks, Chair. Yeah, very good idea. So thank you for bringing it up. So a lot of information that we're presenting here, right? And we want to be able to kind of summarize that in a very, what I call, we want to executize the data. And the way I've done some of the stuff in the past is, we're really looking, I think, at trying to find a way to put a lot of information on one page. So that if somebody wanted to know, hey, what's Measure J done over the past, since 2012? Here's what we've done, or we can post on the website, here's what we've done. So I'll throw out some ideas, and I'm, this isn't by any means, permanent. I think we should discuss a lot of ideas, open to a lot of things, but we talked a little bit about, history and Measure J's raised over $170 million in revenue. We've thrown out that number a couple of times. That's at the end of fiscal year 23. So at the end of this fiscal year, it's going to be close to 200 million that we've raised. So I think a good history of, showing the total amount of revenue that we have taken, in a summarized way would be good. In addition, on this one page, I think we could show some of the projects that have been completed and used by the Measure J funds. So the downtown park comes to mind right away, right? I believe a $44 million project that Measure J is currently funding the debt service on over a period of time. That debt service ends in 2034, but we could show that as a completed project that Measure J is fully supporting. And we have other projects, we could show how much we spent on streets over the past few years, which is a significant amount of dollars. And then, so some of these things that we have completed, we could show that. Maybe in a first column. Second column would be, what are the current projects that Measure J is doing and working on? The LED lighting is a $5 million project. That's significant money, it's a significant project, and I think that would be good to show things like that. Go forward money on streets. We're spending $9 million on streets this year. Historically, we've spent $6 million, so we've upped our game a little bit there. So what are we doing currently could be a second column. Third column could be, what are we doing in the future? So we know Measure J is gonna hopefully fund the library, hopefully fund the fire station. So future major projects that Measure J we're thinking that is going to be used to fund. I think something like that is what I kind of had in mind when, we talked a little bit about just a one pager that shows some of the major, projects that we're funding, total revenue that Measure J has brought in. We could even project revenue through the end of Measure J in 2037. Hopefully it's not the end, but if it does end, that we could do something like that. So that's kind of my thoughts and kind of my idea. Open to any other suggestions if you think there's anything else that we could show that's really important. Because I think a one pager, I think that's what you might have had in mind, just something really high level like that.
Yeah, I think high level and kind of breakdown, like of that almost 200 million, how much went to parks?
Mhm.
How much went to streets? How much went to, city buildings and infrastructure? That kind of gets to like the how much are community members feeling, genuinely touching, those investments. And then I would also say, I think having historical snapshot would be really great. And then I think it could be a really good best practice if we're doing that every couple of years or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if every year is necessary.
I think it's also important, Chris, to point out that the vast majority of Measure J funds come from zip codes outside of Palm Springs. That it's not the citizens who are paying the bulk of Measure J, it's not Palm Springs residents, but non-Palm Springs residents.
Yeah, we are hoping to get some of that information more specifically to see, some of those numbers, but that is very good information and we feel that's very true too. So that outside, that's tourism industry, or people coming in from outside of Palm Springs is really doing some, paying a lot of the sales tax.
If you go to my Zelle, the signs are still up. Still flying. And why can't you have, or maybe a thought would be for the library, actually have a poster there or a board. When you come into City Hall, what would be wrong with, a poster, Major J? When you're in the parks, lots of parks. What's wrong with having a sign like that when you come in and you say, oh, they bought the basketball equipment? I mean, I think everything you're online and paperwork, that when you talk to people and they see it where they are, then it becomes realistic. And I will just say, we had our neighborhood meeting, annual meeting in our neighborhood. There were over 100 people there. And the city manager spoke and he went on about all the great things in Palm Springs. And finally, I raised my hand and said, you have said nothing about Major J. And he was really startled. And then he began to really expand on that. So everybody lives in a community, do it there too, and talk about it among the people. People ask me questions. They're shocked when Naomi, you said how much the shade covers were, remember, at 1 PS? They just sat up and they're not thinking about that. So maybe we have to go more than paper and computer and talk to people, be in places where they are. When parents bring their kids to the rec department, they need to see this is being paid for by Major J. Is that wild idea? It requires some manpower, but I still think if you weren't pressed, You
Yeah,
have to put it out there.
just to follow up on that, you know, we did budget $100,000, for communications and marketing.
Good.
So, I'll try to get in touch with, our communications department and make sure they're aware. And I've told them before that we've got this money out there to spend on communications and marketing. And so maybe they can kind of figure out how to do that.
I would like to, I think your ideas are great. But I think for the public, somehow you have to do a visual presentation. Like a graph that shows we spent 60% on streets and we did. You see the pie, so they get a really quick snapshot, because a lot of times that makes more impact than having to read through all the statistics.
No, very good idea. Yeah, that's something that we should definitely incorporate for sure.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, I really love Commissioner Fetterman's idea of like increasing the signage and that kind of visibility. Could we possibly include that kind of signage for like future sites as well for things in process, like the areas that have been selected for the pedestrian master plan or some of the parks? Areas like a coming soon Measure J project in process, maybe a QR code that would take to the city website. I'm wondering if that's possible. The other thought with that marketing budget, if we could maybe explore some video production, and do kind of a short, like Measure J sizzle reel, like from a marketing perspective. Perhaps the Plaza Theater would be amenable to running that ahead of, films or whenever they have on-screen presentations.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly, pitch that to the communications team for sure, and throw to them all these ideas, yeah.
You got it.
I mean, we've tried doing a video, we tried doing videos a few years ago. But I do think that, kind of the stakes of Measure J are a little bit different now. Where I think and we have a bigger committed marketing budget too. So that makes me a little bit more optimistic that we could get some things off the ground, really by this summer. Any other thoughts around the transparency piece?
Yes, something that I'm seeing in the nonprofit field in terms of marketing, we think that, email marketing or, Facebook and those sorts of things, we gotta have it there, and if you're like me, I scroll through it and delete half my emails because they're marketing emails. And kind of the new thing that's happening is actually something old. And that is one on training, a group of people, they call them promotores in the health field. But citizens who are trained and know what to talk about, maybe from, 1PS and the different neighborhoods, training them so they know what's happening. And they can talk to their neighbors about it, because I think that's the most effective way, one-on-one, getting people in there, and it's their neighbor. And most people trust their neighbor more than they trust, in their government, unfortunately. So I think, looking at that and following what we're seeing, as a trend in marketing, letting the community know about, programs and benefits that are out there for them in the community, it's community based. It's rather coming up rather than going down. And training people from the 1PS groups and neighborhood groups, I think that's a great idea.
Or your annual meeting where your neighbors meet together. That's a perfect offer, particularly if the manager comes to your meeting. Just reminding them, talk about Measure J. But I agree, I think a lot of paper and video gets lost. Cell phone, you really got to talk to people and talk to groups and show them, and then they're believing. Talk to a parent and say, this is what paid for blah, blah. They're very impressed with that. They may not understand the process, but they're grateful for that.
It might be a combination, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Right? Because people all interact with the city in different ways.
Ms. Walford, do you know how much it costs to do a film before the film, like at the Plaza or movie theater? To produce one of those little 2
To
minutes.
reduce it?
Well,
That's a great question. I think
create it.
Theory.
yeah, I
5,000.
would say something like that.
About
That sounds
5,000.
that sounds about right.
That's
It would
not
depend on, yeah, I think you could easily do probably like a small package for under 10,000.
Millions here. That's not bad money.
Yeah, may I ask a question? So if you could just remind me again, you new commissioner, the Measure J sunsets in 2037, is that correct? So, when does this go, like, if it were to be, extended, could you just walk me through that process? I know, is that the ballot measure, but like, does council have to first decide that? Or how does that, what's that timeline and how does that work?
Yeah,
And also, what are our limits and when, in terms of like our role in
Yeah.
talking about
Talking about it.
the ballot, like,
I don't know that it's, you know, I think it has been mentioned before, but, there hasn't been a lot of public discussion around it, you know, but it would be, it could originate as a, you know, a suggestion from the commission. Or, you know, but council does have to approve it, to go onto the ballot, and, it's a significant cost to get on the ballot as well to do that. But yeah, once it's approved, it's official.
And then what would the timeline of that look like theoretically? Like if you were to like avoid it sunsetting in 2037 and have it just continue? I mean, does it like, could that? I guess my question is like, would we have to wait, 10 years before that comes up? Or could that decision be made at any time?
It can be made at any time.
Okay.
to be made permanent. Thank you. Well, I guess my question, I guess there's two possibilities, right? It could be extended and then it could be made permanent, right? Would that be accurate?
It's true, yeah, I mean, it could be extended, I think the, best option would be to make it.
Permanent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is really helpful. Hopefully this is, some, helpful for you, Chris, and your team as you kind of try to figure out what that looks like. And I'm just thinking of the timeline. This might be, if it's possible to have that by like June,
Yeah, I think that'll be fine. The March meeting is gonna come up on me real quick. I know, Vice Chair Robin's got a request in for some financial stuff. I'm hoping to have that in March, but it might look like that'll be April. I got, some time I'm taking off and going to a conference and stuff. So, but yeah, we'll certainly try to put something on some paper and we can talk about it and discuss it, from some of these ideas. I'll certainly touch base with the communications team and talk about how we can use that $100,000 and maybe get their input. And if possible, maybe we can get them here for a discussion on it. So we'll try that as well. So, but thanks. I like all great ideas, so appreciate it. And thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, of course. And then this might be going a little bit into the commissioner member comments and requests, but can you also then clarify, like from here to June, what are some things that we need to do? Because usually there's a whole like projects for review, new potential project, and I don't think we're doing that this year, right? And so like, are there any homework, right, that this commission needs to do by June?
Well, maybe Commissioner Bruder could talk about a little bit about the subcommittee and our vice chair can talk about it, what's going on with that process, because that's happening.
Yeah.
Can you, and then maybe can you clarify what we normally do every spring? Just so for the new commissioners.
Well,
I mean,
I'm gonna defer to Joel because he's been around a little bit longer.
Yeah, I don't have that calendar on me, so I don't have it memorized, but yeah, it's typically where we're looking at all the projects, we're talking about them, you debate the merits of each one of the projects, whether they go forward or not, whether you're gonna fund it or not, then we get to where we go to council and get it before June, right, because July is the budget, so this is the timeline when that would be occurring.
Yeah, and so, we'll have. Sometimes it's like late fall, the potential new projects for consideration. In the spring, there might be presenters from people who are, from that relative respective departments or, so it's kind of a unique year. It's kind of what I'm trying to flag. And that it takes several months to review all of those potential projects to figure out where the commission stands on which ones to budget, which ones to fund. at what level, come to an agreement, and then present it to council. And there's usually a joint meeting in June. So all that to say is, I think that's really important work. If we're don't have that same level of kind of task ahead of us, I think it's a really, really good time to be thinking of some of this other, important transparency work, reporting work, because we kind of have like a little bit of breathing room to do that. In a typical year, I mean, these are usually pretty jam packed. This is why I'm so excited to keep finishing early, because we never used to. Because there would be a lot of those kind of capital projects review conversations. So, mhm.
Sure, so, and just to build on that, the 2-year budget that we passed last year kind of lends to that
Right.
efficiency as well.
Right.
We don't have that process this year, so we do have some time to kind of breathe and maybe take on some other things.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, all right, any other commissioner members' comments or requests? Yes, Commissioner Newby.
The one thing that crossed my mind is when I saw the bollards that are still an active project, and yet here, I think I heard is that, well, the technology really isn't there, so it's just sitting there. Is there or should there be a process whereby projects that have been around for a long time are reviewed and taken off the budget?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's something that definitely can be considered. I know council sets the budgets, right? So they were approved, official budgets. To get it off the budget, it'd be, probably be during the budget cycle. If we get to a point where we haven't moved on that in the next budget cycle, maybe that's a recommendation from the commission, get rid of it, don't fund it, and then we never look at that project again. And because those projects did, were thought of a long time ago by folks that may not be here and that may not be needed. But we also have, I think that one in particular probably won't go away because there is a need for routing parades and things like that. So I think David may really want that money to use it for something. So I think with this new project manager, I think that project will probably grow legs before we cancel it. But yeah, that's something to consider for sure.
Okay. Well, if there's no other yeah,
We should report on our meeting.
oh, yes. Commissioner Footer, do you want to give a quick update on the subcommittee?
That would
for
be
us?
helpful.
That would be great.
We met again and our mission is to clean up the application and the process. And I think when we get it all together, it's going to look very different than how we are looking at our applications and process. So my colleagues here, Brian, why don't you speak about your part with the application? Andrea, you speak about your part with the grant. And I'll just tell you what I'm going to do when it comes time to present this. You want to say a word or two?
Keep going.
No, you're better. You're better. Come on.
I think I can work the handoff on this.
You could probably speak for both of us.
So the drafting and redrafting process has been pretty basic of taking an old version of the application and trying to make that as efficient, user-friendly, digestible as we can. And with that, it's the documentation, the 2-3 pages has been revised, and we can probably have that passed around.
I think we should be ready, yeah, by next meeting.
Not a lot of complication there other than the words, but thematically, what the intent is at this point among the subcommittee is to open up a process for community application in the form of a grant or in the form of funding of projects to be performed by city staff. The overlay on that is the commission as a whole would qualitatively evaluate, not by a necessary scoring system, not a hard scoring system, but more of a clustering of projects with merit, with the information that we have at that time, those that might need more information or input from others, and let's call it a third set that just doesn't, there are not enough substantial legs to this for a commission to vote in favor of it.
within that loose definition as it's drafted now, we would pick dollar amounts to allocate for the winners, if you will, call them winners. And in that, have a capped amount for what one individual project could attain. Last cycle, we were faced with multi-million, 6 and 7 zeros. When we were having debates of whether things should have no more than 5 or 6 zeros, so to speak. A viewpoint for this process is that there would be it would be a self-selecting process. In other words, we don't know who would come to the table asking for funding, and we don't know to what extent those would be grants and what would be requests the city do more work for the city. But we'll find that out when applications come in. And collectively, we use our judgment as to what makes sense. And maybe we find that there's a vast proportion of it as intended initially, that it would be grants, self-managed projects. That becomes more viable for implementation because of the burdens on staff. But it could be that there are a handful of more bite-sized that we think have merit, and that with the input from staff, there's support for actually putting those to work within that 24 to 25 fiscal year cycle. Okay, so that's a lot of words to describe how we get to a point where we go to the public, hopefully in June, go to the public with a 2-month window to submit a fairly simple application process. More on that later, meaning next month. But with the expectation that that runs through a couple of months for the public, with another 3 months or so for the commission and staff to evaluate and come to a punchline at the end of the year. And with communication up front for outreach, that this is coming, and availability and access to the commission during the process, so that when we finally get to a point where we're convening over maybe 2, maybe 3 meetings to get to a point of actually making a decision on a slate to recommend to council.
Yeah, that'd be great to have in the fall.
Yeah, the three of us did agree that less is more, and we've taken out a lot of language out of that application. There's a lot of history about Major J in there, the first page, and blah, blah. You can find that if you go to the website. So we want the application to get people right down to what they're doing, what they're asking for. So that's the money grant, like we're asking money, not grant. The project would be asking total cost from Major J, that kind of an ask. And then Andre, you speak a bit about the grants that could be possible.
Sure, and I guess just to add on to what you shared, I think overall what our discussions have been about is just balancing the large number of projects we currently have in place and the amount of work that staff is doing on those, and but at the same time still trying to provide the community with opportunities to submit projects, but hopefully at a lower dollar amount, so that if they do have to be implemented by staff, they're easier, they take less time, we see traction on those, sooner rather than later. And then for organizations who are in a position to be able to implement their own project, great, we can oversee that. And we've also talked about just a process to better oversee those types of grants going forward. So that's what we'll be coming back with next month, what kind of the dollar amounts we're thinking about. Again, to your comment, we don't know who would apply, so we don't know what the mix would be, but our hope would be that we are able to provide more grants to organizations who can implement their own projects that are still in line with the spirit of Measure J and what the intent is.
And those would be like Mizell, where they have some money. They have some money to throw into the pot, so they're not asking Major J to cover all of it, so they have that. My job is looking at really what the commission does. And I feel we need to be more due diligent about our projects. Visit them, find out what they really are, ask more questions about them, and that's what Brian is addressing. we say yes, and then they're gone, and then there are problems with them, or we never hear about them again, or we don't know what's going on. So I think we're spending taxpayer money, and maybe we assign, you go to the pool and I'll go to the school and just take a look at where our money has gone. I think we owe that to the citizens of Palm Springs, and to make the applicant much more responsible. When you vet yourself, find out how much things cost. Are you on city land or are you on Indian land? Make a phone call. So that's part of the process when we're looking at those applications. Are you on target closer to the real money? You know, come 10,000 and it's really 15. They can't always determine that, but they can get closer to it. So there's kind of cleaning up a bit of what we do and being more responsible about it. And writing it there, and when we vet the projects ourselves, we say, there's not enough information here that makes it a really go-to project. So I hope that is what you're expecting from us.
Yeah.
And I would suggest before next meeting, we're hoping to come up with documents for, go online, pull down the application that we are now using. So you can compare where those changes are, and you can say, wow, whoa, and then here's what the new document's going to look like and say. And that would help that discussion really go, because all of you have to approve this.
Yeah, I think that's really great progress, and thank you to the subcommittee for kind of reviewing and also trying to make it just easier for all parties involved, right? We want this to be, you know, a smooth, understandable process and manageable for us and staff. One thing that has me thinking, and maybe David, I don't know if you can speak to this now or maybe later, but one thing that we should be mindful of is that if there's a repair or maintenance issue, that might not have to be a community initiated project. Maybe it's like to flag it to Public Works, right? So we might want just some language, something like if this is, I don't know, like I would hate to see a necessary repair get funneled into our community initiated project, take 2 years, which it could easily take, and then to get to Public Works versus flagging it to Public Works more immediately, and that being a reasonable, necessary repair that needs to be done, and then it's on their radar and something that they would be fixing anyway, right? So there might be like some type of something where we could say like, if it's this, if it's, you know, damaged, if it's, you know, please report it to, I don't know, I don't know if there's any thoughts around that, but like, I don't want, it seems silly to wait 18 months to tell you that a water fountain is broken, you know?
That's a great point. I think, I mean, I'd be happy to have that conversation. I see what you're getting, where you're coming from, so I think that's probably a bridge we could cross, but the easiest way, I'm not sure, but I think certainly that's something that makes sense. I totally get your point.
So are you asking about projects we funded when we hear that there's a problem with them? Is
Well,
that-
like if, you know, I go to parks a lot with my toddlers. And if I wasn't on Measure J and I heard, hey, there's some interest in making repairs, I might do an application for new shade, or, yeah, I can make a lot of recommendations, but if I see something like outright damaged, right, then that seems different than saying, I would love to see shade at this park.
Yeah.
Right, and so we might wanna just have something where we kind of make that distinction, you know, this thing is loose, we need to repair it, like, that's something that we shouldn't. I'd hate to kind of go through a long community initiated project.
I think the commission can flag it and just say this is a repair and just give it to staff.
Yeah,
Say,
that-
"Hey,
I know, but we're not gonna see it for 3 or 4 months, right? Like, if it's gonna be open for 2 months, it might take us 2 or 3 months to review it.
Right, so I think if we're trying to look at it differently, what I think I'm hearing is there's, right now, today or tomorrow, if somebody spots something that's broken, they can always reach out to us. Every single one of our
Absolutely.
departments, we take emails, we do respond, there's a whole application that they
Yep.
use to fix things. So I think that's an aside, but if something comes through the application process, it really is just a repair, then that should be flagged immediately, and then we look at it and we give it to the appropriate department.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm going to, like, I know that there's like ways to do that, and maybe we can just make that clear in the application.
Okay,
So
I
that
see,
people
okay,
can,
okay,
like,
good.
know-
If this is a repair, here's how you
Right.
go about supporting it,
Sure.
instead of asking, okay, I get, it, okay.
Yeah.
And I think that could be made,
Yeah.
but if you're trying to simplify it, you don't want to put a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
but maybe
It's like,
there's a
go
way.
here.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to have a conversation at some point with you folks. That makes sense. No problem.
Great.
But that may be also when we go through these, to say, has anybody been out there? Have you talked to people? You know, our own eyes tell us what we see. Have you been to the pool? What does it look like? I find that interesting. People there will tell me things, and go down to the turf and see if it looks good. I mean, just you driving by. We perhaps need to be more attentive to what we do, other than just say, here's your money. We need to, I feel we need to follow our projects a little bit into, we know they're good, they're being done, the money has been spent. That doesn't take a lot of time.
Well, and I, just to kind of wrap up, I think that's also why having, I'm so pleased with this new class of Measure J commissioners, having people who experience the city in different ways is so valuable, because they're going to different parts of the city, they're going to different trails. Some people are gonna park, some people, you know, they might have someone in their family who is in a wheelchair and recognizes the issues on the sidewalks a lot more tunely than I do, and
Right.
whatever it might be. And so, you know, having that, yes, we can assign it, but also our lived experiences kind of
Good point.
reflect that too. So. Great. All right, well, thank you so much. At 6:51, we'll close out this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Huh?
I didn't realize I was late.
I remember.